One day, I was just sitting, enveloped in the sound of a string quartet. I found myself thinking 200,000 years ago, we humans just woke up on this island of a planet. 200,000 years ago. And today, we humans have arrived at this. Well, together, this quartet and I would like to tell you a story. It's a story of discovery and wonder, a story of uncertainty and of danger, a story of adventure and inspiration. In short, it's a story about us and about this island planet we inhabit. We don't know where it ends yet. But let's begin with this. And this device has no moving parts. Well, you might say, 200,000 years of learning, it's going to take you somewhere. But in fact, nearly everything we know about our island planet, nearly every piece of knowledge and technology we possess, we've acquired in just the last few hundred years. Think about it. 2,000 centuries from there to here, and nearly everything we know about our island planet, we learned in just the last two. Distinguishing these past 2 centuries an emergence just a few hundred years ago, one of humankind's great endeavors, our enterprise of rigorous science. This is understanding built on observation and measurement, careful, precise, repeatable, as a system for acquiring knowledge. It stuns. Knowledge that astonishes us. And knowledge that serves us. And knowledge that forewarns. If you watch the evening news, you know. Well, we can see storms coming from beyond the horizon. And sometimes we can see those storms before they even form.
Human beings in the natural world are on a collision course. Many of our current practices put at serious risk the future that we wish for human society, and may so alter the living world that it will be unable to sustain life in the manner that we know.
Unable to sustain life in a manner that we know? Well, that sounds like a bit of a storm. Words penned in 1992. The world's preeminent scientists present to humanity a warning entitled, "The 1992 World Scientist Warning to Humanity." Unable to sustain life in a manner that we know. That is a bit of a warning. There have been others, many others. You see, our civilization is enveloped by the earth. Human systems of food, energy, economy immersed in soil, water, climate, life. Well, 28 years since that warning, nearly a third of a century, and our impacts have not tempered. They've intensified. And there have been more warnings, warnings upon warnings as humanity devours nature. As Holocene, that era of stable planetary climate as old as civilization itself, destabilizes. to become Anthropocene. Anthropocene, the age of humans. A raging human planetary feast so gluttonous, so relentless, we have become our own geologic era.
The world's coral reefs are on a trajectory to collapse within a human generation. They will be the first, but certainly not the last ecosystem to succumb to the Anthropocene.
Yet another warning, more knowledge. But knowledge is not wisdom. Existential risk, our system of knowledge lays bare. Meaningful response, our system of living appears to prevent. And yet, we know where we are. And we know how we got here. And most importantly, we know where we're headed. And so the time has come. The time has come.
The time has come for us to believe what we know.
The time has come for us to believe what we know. The words of Jan Artis Bertrand, not scientist, but artist, that other of humankind's great endeavors. All that we are is telling us the time has come for us to believe what we know. Believe what we know. 2,000 centuries from there to here, and nearly every piece of knowledge we possess, we've acquired in just the last 2. But there's something missing. 2,000 centuries from there to here, and so much of what we once knew, we've forgotten in just the last 2. And so today, an exploration. Just exactly how much do we know about our island planet and about ourselves? And how much have we forgotten? Planet Earth, planet water. 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen, 3 atoms arranged just so. And from this structure, the extraordinary flows. There are hydrogen bonds and electron pairs, surface tension, capillary action. There's a triple point, absorption bands, quantum states of rotation and vibration endlessly. Could we marvel? Well, time presses. For now then, just that of water that gives rise to life. And all life needs water. This we know. No accident that planet water is the living planet. Because through water, life's climate emerges, and in water, life's chemistry unfolds. In the atmosphere, the water is vapor, a greenhouse mist of molecular snares. They trap Earth's radiance and render it a greenhouse warms. But at the poles, the water is solid, frozen into vast sheets of reflecting white. They throw back the sun, cooling the planet, a greenhouse tamed. And then in the oceans, the water is liquid. It drinks in the sun and carries it. Conveyed by complex currents from equator to poles, the sun's warmth circulates, its energy shared. And in this synergy of warming and cooling and mixing, of energy captured and carried and raptured, a balance emerges. And a climate of creation's only known bios appears, made possible by this simple form of 3 atoms arranged just so. And even as this form fashions life's climate, it facilitates life itself. Because only in water do life's nutrients dissolve and coalesce, living structure assembles. And in water, life's breath begins. Respiration, metabolism, photosynthesis. Once assembled, living structure sustained. And in water, life's energy pulses. Electricity flows and neurons spark. Once assembled and sustained, living structure made animate. In water, simple life begins, and in water, complex life evolves. This then, chemistry and climate, we know is why all life needs water. Well, thank goodness there's so much of it. Not so fast. Water seems plentiful on the water planet, but only a trickle flows fresh, and just a trickle of that flows within our grasp. And when all the drops are counted, when all accounting concludes, just one drop in 10,000 is ours to sip. And so this too we know about water, that it is precious. And we know a little more. You see, from water purity to water supply, all is not well with humanity's water. So how much are we free to waste? How much are we free to pollute? Ancient glaciers and aquifers quench thirsty billions until they disappear. Planet Earth, planet water. Planet water, planet life. So much life. Ancient, diverse, everywhere. More than 1 million species we know about, millions upon millions we really don't. The sheer variety. This biodiversity is breathtaking. Woven into tapestries of living systems, ecosystems, life and environment interacting, interdependent, inseparable. It is the essence of life on our island planet, Earth species not separate from their environment or each other, but arising from their environment together. They self-assemble like a snowflake, reform their environment, and are themselves reformed, evolved through environmental selection. An evolution, though, not of millions of separate species, but co-evolution of millions of connected components of a vast, self-assembling, self-repairing, self-governing, complex and adaptive biosystem. And unknowing as we are of most of its components and how they're connected, we understand this biosystem but a little. Of the millions of things to understand, we understand approximately 5. Because these are life's most basic operating principles, nature's paradigms, and they are clear and visible everywhere. Number 1, Earth's bios, we know, is sustained through diversity. Because from this biodiversity emerges extraordinary resilience. So not just one species of pollinator, for example, keeping food on the table, but multitudes. And not just one sad dish on the menu, but a vast melange. And not just one lonely monotone scavenger picking the bones, but a symphony. In other words, life is not some collection of keystone species without which no one else can survive, but communities of overlapping guilds, reinforcing and serving one another. This we do understand about life on Earth. Number 2, Earth's bios, we know, produces no waste. Waste for one, nutrient for another. The carbon dioxide I exhale, taken up by my ficus. What the poet Wendell Berry has termed nature's great economy throws nothing away. And think about it. Where would that be? There is no away. There is no away. And this, too, we understand about life on Earth. Number 3, Earth's bios, we know, is ever-changing, but not ever-growing. Life shimmers in a dynamic equilibrium, a continuous process of new life, new experimentation, new variation, and special places, coral reefs, and wetlands, and tropical forests, are the nurseries and the laboratories in which life replenishes and reinvents. And this we do understand about life on Earth. Number 4 is a very special principle, a principle of human life. And it's this: Earth's bios, we know, envelops and sustains us. Our water is purified by wetlands, our food pollinated by creatures great and small, seen and unseen, our nutrients cycled by insects and microbes, and our oxygen is produced, well, our oxygen is exhaled by flora of infinite variety, and we depend upon them all. And they depend upon each other. It does not appear that anything depends upon us, save perhaps the Pekingese. Something else we know, number 5, is that the whole of the biosphere can be driven to collapse 5 times, the fossils tell us, each time triggered by rapid environmental change. Though life on Earth is remarkably resilient, it is apparently not infinitely so. And though there remains so much more we do not know, we do know one more thing. I quote from a now aging issue of the prestigious scientific journal Nature. Humans are forcing planetary-scale critical transitions in the biosphere, transforming Earth into a state unknown in human experience, rapidly, unpredictably, irreversibly, in just a few human generations. And as we stand before this great, complex, and adaptive biosystem, who among us identifies the pieces that are not needed? Each of us is 16 years old. Good news to many of you, I suspect. The cells lining our stomachs are just 5 days old. That is, they're replaced every 5 days. The molecules forming those cells every few minutes. In just the last minute, each of us has shed about 35,000 skin cells. Our skin regenerates about every 2 weeks. Our skeletons about every 10 years. 16 years, then, is the average age of the tissue in our bodies. Our bodies are in constant flux. Old bits are discarded, new bits take their place, but this constant regeneration requires constant input. In other words, well, we need to eat. And we've talked about water, and we've talked about life. It's time to talk about dinner. And there are pieces of the biosphere, very special pieces, called primary producers or autotrophs. Special, well, because they feed everyone else. They're in the oceans and they're on land, and most of them are microscopic. In the oceans, phytoplankton underlie all. Thousands of microscopic species living near the surface, in the light, moving energy from sun to substance and nourishing everything. Like krill. And together, phytoplankton and krill feed the whole of the oceans, from the tiniest creatures to the grandest. Along the way, phytoplankton produce half the world's oxygen, half the breath you just took. Produced by these fine fellows, thank you very much. Now on land, we're tempted to think of plants as primary producers. But no, no, no. You see, underlying plants is soil. And I'm not talking about dirt. This is rock, pounded to clay by water over millions of years and then infused with life. Now, never in my life did I imagine I would be fascinated by soil. I'm a physicist, for goodness sakes. But it turns out soil is pretty fascinating. Just a handful can contain billions of living organisms. In some soils, more than 1 million species per thimbleful. The living component of just an acre of soil can contain 900 pounds of earthworms, 2,400 pounds of fungi, 1,500 pounds of bacteria, 890 pounds of arthropods and algae, that's insects and their salads, all in an acre of soil just a few inches deep, and topsoil is just a few inches deep, forming at just 1 inch per decade to, in some places, just 1 inch per century. The world's dinner, brought to us by phytoplankton and soil. And so it is we know that the health and well-being of all life on Earth is inextricably tied to the health of the oceans and to the well-being on land. But so it is we also know all is not well in the oceans, and all is not well on land. as oceans warm and turn to acid, well, we toxify the living soil and watch it blow away. Arising from this Earth system is another system. We'll call it System Us. Living tissue made sentient, sentience made civilized. Through ages of stone, iron, and copper emerge human systems within ecosystems, human bubbles in the biosphere. And then, in the age of carbon, bubbles begin to merge, everything connecting to everything. Food to energy, energy to economy, economy to governance, one nation to another, each nation to all the others, altogether global, altogether complex. A hedge fund flaps its financial wings in Hong Kong, and an economic hurricane swirls in London. At last, a definitive answer to that age-old question. Well, in the age of carbon, everything has to do with the price of tea in China. Fold a piece of paper in half. You double its thickness. Fold it again. It doubles again. And after 9 folds, you will have a piece of paper about 1 inch thick. But with just 4 more folds, you could have a piece of paper 1 foot thick. And with just 12 folds more, if you can manage, you will have a piece of paper 1 mile thick. What? You don't believe me? It's right there in the math. Exponential growth in action. Everything is small until it's huge, and everything is fine until it's not. Well, in nature, of course, such growth never lasts because it cannot. The physics of a material world supersedes the mathematics of infinite growth. In nature, a system grows to maturity and levels, or a system grows through overshoot of its resource to collapse. But in the age of humans, in the age of carbon, in the age of industry and corporation, humanity finds itself inhabiting a bubble inflated on the premise that a piece of paper can be folded 25 times and then folded again. Growth without physical limit. Apparently, our human bubble no longer perceives itself a part of the biosphere, but apart from it. We are anthroposphere, inhabited by species apparently not subject to nature's rules. Whole ecosystems of national and corporate species, for example, whose very paradigm is growth without limit, through extraction without limit, producing waste without limit, a diluted human metabolism that will not last. Anthroposphere is industrial energy, a system of energy powering billions. By scraping from the earth the living layers called overburden, to feed on what's beneath, ancient toxic rocks, gas, and goo, which we then rip from the ground and spew to the sky and on a scale no one really comprehends. But with half this resource already gone and our appetite only growing, this is a system of energy we absolutely know will not last, because it cannot. Because the physics of limited resource supersedes the mathematics of unlimited growth. Anthroposphere is also industrial food, a system of food feeding billions by draining the land of water, washing away the soil, and emptying the oceans of life. No longer a system of agriculture for human well-being, but of agribusiness for shareholder return. This is a high input, high waste, low diversity, high impact system of food in overshoot that we absolutely know will not last because physics supersedes math. Hang on, you might say, why do we have such systems? And we have them because most of all, anthroposphere is industrial economy, a corporate system of production, trade, and consumption singularly premised on growth without limit. A system designed not for people, but for consumers, hounded from cradle to grave to consume each day more than the last. The systems require it. A system of hyperconsumption that has devoured 1/3 of our resource base in the last 30 years. 1.7 planets are required to sustain the anthroposphere today. And 1.7 is a special number because, and this is absolutely key, it's a number greater than 1, though some of us need more planets than others. 60,000 plastic bags, the number we Americans choose to consume every 5 seconds. 2 million plastic bottles every 5 minutes. Over the last 50 years, we Americans have chosen to more than double our individual resource consumption. And along the way, we have managed to make ourselves less happy. If everyone on the planet consumed at the rate we do, we would need 4 planets to sustain us, maybe 5. Now surely, this is a system we absolutely, unequivocally know will not last. It really cannot. And since we know that these systems will not last, the time has come for us to believe what we know. High time, past time, imminent collapse aside, because arising from hyperconsumption is hyperdestruction. Sacrifice zones of land and life, real people, real places, everywhere on our island planet. And like everything in the anthroposphere, these sacrifice zones are growing. Cheap food, cheap energy, cheap stuff, it turns out, isn't so cheap. But change is coming, like it or not. Anthroposphere is reforming its environment and will itself be reformed. Intricate interactions between sun, land, and air, water, life, and ice wash over us as a rising tide as we envelop ourselves and all those who come after in a climate we have never, ever known. We risk one mammal in 4, one bird in 8, one amphibian in 3, more than 1 million species this century, co-inhabitants of our island planet tossed overboard, their connections and their functions unknown. And with perhaps less than a decade for meaningful response to take hold, we are tickling the dragon's tail. And so you see, we cannot burn Saudi Arabia's oil, or Australia's coal, Canada's tar, Siberia's gas, or our own. This we know through a system of knowledge. Physics and chemistry, biology, ecology, these things we really do know about our island planet and about ourselves. And so truly, the time has come for us to believe what we already know.
These images are difficult to watch. We struggle with them at every performance. But these pictures tell stories. Stories that connect individuals and solitary creatures, communities and entire ecosystems. It is their most important lesson that all of these stories are connected, emergent from the same underlying structure of extraction, exploitation, oppression, and destruction.
This is the cargo hold of a Chinese factory fishing vessel, intercepted in the Galapagos Marine Reserve in 2017, with a catch of 300 tons, mostly sharks, including protected species. The Chinese fishing fleet is the world's largest, and its enterprise is more strip mining than fishing. No longer able to support itself, the fleet is kept alive by huge government subsidies. This fleet is not only destroying whole ecosystems, but wipes out subsistence communities where fishing has been the culture for centuries.
Badly burned in the Australian bushfires of January 2020, this image from Kangaroo Island, southwest of Adelaide, tells the story of a koala bear and her rescuer. As an area the size of South Korea burned, many were less fortunate. Over 1 billion animals perished, including more than 40,000 koalas. Unprecedented heat and drought, fueled by climate change, underlie the rapidly intensifying fire seasons. Much of this unique habitat will never recover.
In this image from 2016, 11-year-old Daniel labors in the cobalt mines of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he carries bags of cobalt from a dig site to a depot to be sold. He has never been to school. Up to 35,000 children like Daniel in the DRC alone, some as young as 7 years old, toil at the very bottom of the global cobalt market. Cobalt is a critical component in the batteries that power modern electronics. The smartphones in our pockets contain several grams, our laptops several ounces, an electric vehicle up to 20 pounds.
These are stories from the world as it is. A world emergent from paradigms of profane extraction, oppression, and exploitation. It is not, however, the only possible world, because this world can be reimagined into a new world founded on new paradigms, producing new emergent outcomes. And so we ask you to imagine. Imagine a world free of sacrifice zones, in which pollution is not pollution but nutrient. A world that no longer even knows the meaning of fossil fuel, whose rising seas and temperatures have been halted. Imagine a world whose ecosystems are thriving and whose biosphere is replenishing and whose bounties are shared by everyone. Imagine communities that sequester as much carbon, absorb and filter as much water, house as much biodiversity, and capture as much energy as the landscapes that envelop them. Communities whose food and clothes and goods do not wreak havoc with the people and planet in the name of profit, but nourish and comfort and serve those who consume them, as well as those who produce them. Imagine communities whose inhabitants are secure in nutrition, water, health, energy, housing, education, occupation, income, voice. Imagine a world meeting the needs of all within the means of a living planet. Well, as it turns out, imagining such a world isn't as hard as you think, because in fact, such a world is underway. Snapshots of it are everywhere, and the pictures of extraction and oppression are not the only pictures that we see.
Every picture is a story, and there are so many stories. But the stories do not end here. There are other, very different stories of people working to slow the damage to the earth and its beings, working to imagine a new human world consistent with nature's paradigms, working to create a shift in consciousness from which this new world can emerge, working to transform from extraction and exploitation to regeneration and vibrancy.
Across the planet, a global youth movement has emerged as a powerful force that is transforming the conversation. From 15-year-old Swede Greta Thunberg, whose solitary school strike inspired and united a host of young activists, to Leah Namujirwa in Uganda, to Vic Barrett in New York, and thousands of others across the globe. Their efforts led to a global youth strike of over 4 million young people in the fall of 2019 and has precipitated a deluge of political action globally that is wholly transforming the landscape of climate change response, including introduction of the Green New Deal in the United States and similar initiatives elsewhere.
When the Dakota Access Pipeline was proposed to carry oil from the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota under the Missouri and Mississippi rivers to Illinois, it posed significant risk to the drinking water of the Standing Rock Indian Reservation and surrounding tribal communities in North and South Dakota. In 2016, these communities mobilized and became water protectors, attracting thousands of supporters who traveled to the site from across the globe. Using their bodies to physically halt construction, these water protectors braved bitter cold and heavily militarized police and private security forces, with many sustaining injury and arrest. Their efforts forced years of delay in the project. Though it was eventually built, their actions and publicity have now resulted in a court-ordered halt to the flow of oil, not only in the Dakota Access Pipeline, but in 2 others as well. It is not the end of the story, and this particular legal battle is far from over. But the example of Standing Rock's water protectors makes it clear that direct action activism is a critical tool in slowing the forward motion of high-polluting extractive industries, which disproportionately affect indigenous communities around the world.
Moving from extractive, exploitive, destructive systems to regenerative, distributive, thriving systems requires concrete, deliberate plans. In 2020, Amsterdam became the first major city to commit to such a model. In the words of one of the model's principal architects, Kate Rayworth, smart policymakers realize that they don't need a solution to financial crises, and a different one for climate crisis, and a different one for health emergencies. They need a paradigm that no longer pushes for endless growth, but instead focuses on thriving and resilience and well-being within communities. The goal is to meet the core needs of all within the ecological means of the planet, and Amsterdam is now fully committing to doing just that.
Meeting the needs of all within the means of our island planet. Yes, let's do that by believing what we know and remembering what we've forgotten. Hundreds of years of scientific knowledge about where we live, informing tens of thousands of years of indigenous knowledge, evolutionary knowledge about how to live. Building a global civilization through place-based communities, taming extractive technologies with a regenerative mindset, and replacing short-term incentives with long-term perspectives. To do it, we will need to know and understand many things, and the first is this: successes like these, friction to slow the damage of existing systems and vision to transform these systems, don't just happen, they emerge from a mindset of resolve. It's a mindset not endlessly tormented over whether or not the task at hand can be done, but a mindset that assumes it can and then focuses on finding the next step. Well, the question then is, where does this mindset come from? And when the road ahead appears utterly daunting, how do those of us upon this road remain somehow undaunted? Amory Lovins, one of the many visionaries working to reimagine and transform our world, often speaks not of hope, but of what he calls applied hope. And applied hope, according to Lovins, isn't about some vague, far-off future. Rather, it is created and expressed moment by moment through our choices. Applied hope is not for us to consume, but for us to generate. And it is this mindset of resolve, generating action, generating hope, that is critical right now, because we have arrived at the moment when humanity has exactly enough time starting right now. The next decade will be the most important any of us will ever live through. And so this is our mindset. And now, just one question remains. What do we actually do with this mindset? When every task seems immediate, enormous, and endless, what do we do with the minutes of our days? It's a fair question. In answer to which, I have formulated a kind of mathematical theorem of effort. Write this down. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you're not alone and you need not do everything. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you're not alone, and you need not do everything. The power of community. But there is a corollary to this theorem, and it's this. Each of us must do something. And so this is what you do, what each of us must do. With our mindset and our minutes, pick something and make it yours. And whatever your interests, whatever your talents, whatever your means, I promise you, there is work for you to do. And people to help you do it. Around the world, there are thousands of efforts, thousands of organizations generating thousands and thousands of stories of people already driving response, not simply as consumers, but as citizens, transforming whole systems of energy, food, economy, waste, transportation, finance, health, education, governance, people applying hope in their own communities and around the world with knowledge, with purpose, and with unwavering resolve. This journey is underway. It's a journey, though, whose conclusion is by no means certain, as these sacrifice zones continue to grow. So pick something and make it yours. And if you can do only one thing tomorrow, do this. Talk about these issues. Normalize these conversations. We will never have the world that we need until we can envision the world that we need, and it will not be widely envisioned until it is widely discussed. So pick something, make it yours, and talk about it. Comfort zones are made to be stretched. And folks, it's time to stretch. And so all of this culminates at last in this moment, a moment in our lives when we must ask, who are we? Who are we? Each of us must ask. Believe what we know. Embrace what we know. Living in a mindset of unwavering resolve, we pick something, and with action and with hope, we make it ours. We won't be alone. Exponential growth in action. Everything seems small until it's not. Until we find ourselves lifted in a rising tide that we ourselves have created.